Okay, at number 8, I accidentally stopped the video in the middle, so we'll continue from number 8. Discuss the mood or theme of Mappo, Chinese say Mofa, the age of degeneration of the Dharma. The Dharma is just another word for the Buddha's law. So discuss this mood or theme of Mappo that pervades the work. Just cite specific passages. In what other works have we seen this eschatological notion? Okay, and Mappo, as I started to explain before I cut it off, is the third stage in the Buddhist view of human history. There are 3 stages. There's the age of the correct law, or Shobo. There's the age of the what is the word? The age of the counterfeit law, or Zobo, right? And then there's the final age, which is the age of Mappo, which is the age of degeneration, the age when the law of Buddha is completely forgotten, when people live according to their own whims and desires, and all hell breaks loose on earth, and we see a reign of chaos and terror and whatnot, right? And according to the Japanese, Mappo begins in 1056, I think. You might want to check that, but somewhere in the middle of the 11th century begins this era of Mappo, and it lasts, according to the standard understanding of Japanese Buddhism, 1,000 years, I think, right? So we're still in the midst of Mappo right now, okay? So discuss this idea of Mappo, of degeneration and eschatology as we see it in this work, is the question. Number 9, discuss the apocalyptic scenes of starvation that he claims to have witnessed. How many corpses does he find in the capital during the 2-month count, right? That's just a basic plot question or summary of his depiction of the starved corpses. Number 10, discuss the sermon that appears after his litany of calamities. Okay, the sermon, he gives a sermon. You remember he was a Buddhist priest, I think, Shinto, born into a prominent Shinto family and ended up moving toward Buddhism. But he gives a very Buddhist-sounding sermon in this section of the piece. All in life, life in the world is difficult, is how the sermon begins. So review that and answer this question. What does he see as the basic dilemma of the human condition? What is his implied answer to this dilemma, if there is any answer? Does he offer any solution or hope? Okay, pretty straightforward question. Number 11, describe his first hut, which he built in his early 30s. Remember, he's older now, but in his early 30s, he did a similar experiment. He built a hut out in the middle of nowhere, at least on the outskirts of the city. Why did he build it? What series of events led him to build it? Okay, number 12, describe his second, or his current hut, okay, which he builds in the depths of the Mount Hino-san, while in his late 50s. Okay, what are his reasons for building this even smaller hut? Describe the interior of this hut. What things does he keep there? What do they reveal about him? Okay, fairly straightforward question. Number 13, who is the only other human with whom he interacts at present? What do they do together? Okay, this is a sort of monological story. It's just him talking most of the time, but he does communicate with one other human being. Describe that other human being and their relationship. Number 14, Japan is sometimes said to be lacking a tradition of individualism, right? You hear this cliche all the time, and there's some truth to the cliche, but there's also some nonsense to it as well. This cliche that Japan is collectivist and always has been more collectivist than individualism, whereas individualism began in the West and didn't really take root in Japan. You hear it all the time. But you see elements of individualism all throughout Japanese history, I think, if you look closely enough. And you see it here too, all right? Japan is sometimes said to be lacking a tradition of individualism, but isn't this essay and the Taoist tradition that informs it? Remember that Kamo no Chōmei draws from Taoist sources in this story repeatedly. Okay, and Taoism is a very individualistic sort of philosophy of life. All right, but isn't this essay in a sense an expression of rugged individualism, of self-reliance, etc.? Discuss this question, particularly in the context of the paragraph that begins, when it comes to friends, people respect the wealthy. Okay, there's a long passage that begins with that. Consider that passage in relation to this issue of individualism. which of course isn't really a concept in the late Heian period, but you can sort of retrospectively apply the concept of individualism to a lot of what he's saying, I think. Number 15. What does the narrator say about attachment, shūshin or shūchaku, which according to Buddhist teachings is the main obstacle to enlightenment, right? The main obstacle to the cessation of suffering, to the cessation of samsara, or rinne, the circle of transmigration, right? So yeah, attachment is pretty much a bad word in Buddhism. It's what you have to overcome. Attachment to everything, all kinds of attachment is what you need to overcome. What does this narrator say about attachment? Has the narrator managed to cut all attachments, right? And the answer, I'll give you the answer right now, it's pretty much no. If not, to what is he still attached, right? And we see this in Tsurezure Gusa as well. You see it in a lot of Heian and late Heian period works, where the narrator is striving to cut all attachments, but is unable to, right? And if the narrator were actually able to cut all attachments, it wouldn't make for much of a story or a work of literature, right? Because somebody who's attained sort of perfect enlightenment and sort of squeezed out the flame of nirvana and all that won't make a very interesting narrator, isn't capable of telling an interesting story, right? You have to still be in the world of Bonno in order to relate to other humans, I think. So I don't think there's any instances in Japanese literature of somebody who's actually exited the world of Bonno, the world of samsara, the world of rinne, transmigration, and managed to make an interesting literary work out of it. Okay, so discuss that notion of attachment as it appears in the story. And final question, discuss the ending. Right? The last ending begins, pondering this truth on a tranquil morning, that section, which seems to end on an ambivalent note. Do the final lines suggest that jiriki, self-reliance, is a dead end, and that tariki, through the divine grace of Amitabha Buddha, is the only path to salvation? Alright, jiriki, tariki. I mentioned these two key terms in my lecture on Buddhism, I think. Jiriki is the idea that you can attain enlightenment, attain salvation through ji, jibun no ji, right, yourself. Riki is the kanji for strength, right, chikara, basically self-reliance, the idea that you can attain enlightenment, salvation through acts alone, right? Whereas tariki is more faith-based, and you see this in Christianity too, right? This distinction between faith and acts. It's very similar to that actually. It's a dead end, and that tariki is the idea of grace, right? That you can't do it on your own, that you need the divine grace of Amitabha in the case of Japanese Buddhism of the Heian period, is the only path to salvation. So what is this narrator of Hōjōki saying about this distinction between jiriki and tariki? Which is he leaning toward in the end, if any of those two? Alright, so that ends my commentary on the study guide to Kamo no Chōmei's Hōjōki. Right, at the end of the study guide I have the original Japanese text written there. You can sift through that and read as much as you can, and read it as you look through Professor Chambers' translation. Alright, and at the very bottom I have further reading information. Okay, if you have any questions, send me an email. That is all.